The rain hammered against the windows of Kensington Palace that November evening. Inside the West Corridor, Captain James Hartley stood at attention, his red uniform pristine, his face unreadable. But his heart was racing. He had just heard something he was never meant to hear. Through the carved oak door behind him, voices rose and fell, sharp, tense. One belonged to Prince William. The other was Queen Camilla's, and the words being exchanged were not the polite, measured tones of royalty. They were raw, angry. James had served the royal family for 12 years. He had protected them through protests, through scandals, through grief. He knew when to listen and when to forget. But tonight, forgetting would be impossible. "You're overstepping, Camilla." William's voice cut through the wood like a blade. There was a pause. Then came her response, calm but cold. "I'm simply ensuring the crown's future. Your father agrees with me." James felt his jaw tighten. He shouldn't be hearing this. He turned slightly, pretending to adjust his glove, trying to give them privacy. But the voices grew louder. "This isn't about the crown. This is about control." William's tone was steady, but there was steel beneath it. "And I won't let you push my children into decisions they're not ready for." The word children made James's chest tighten. He had watched Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis grow up behind these walls. He had seen William fight to give them something his own mother never had: a normal childhood, as much as royalty allowed. If you're loving this story, make sure to subscribe and stay with us until the end. You won't believe what happens next. James heard footsteps inside the room. Heavy, pacing. Then Camilla spoke again, and this time her voice was sharper, less controlled. "Your mother tried to do things her way too, William. Look where that got her." The silence that followed was deafening. James felt a chill run down his spine. He had been there the day Diana's death was announced. He had seen the young princes, barely more than boys, walking behind her coffin. He had seen William's face blank, distant, shattered, and now, decades later, someone had just weaponized that pain. "Get out." William's voice was low, dangerous. "William, I didn't mean get out." The door flew open. James snapped to attention, eyes forward. Queen Camilla swept past him, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Her face was composed, regal, but there was a tightness around her eyes. She didn't look at him. Behind her, Prince William stood in the doorway. His hands were clenched at his sides. His breathing was controlled, but his eyes burned. For a moment, their gazes met. James, the loyal guard. William, the future king. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. A recognition. A silent alliance. William gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Then he stepped back and closed the door. James remained at his post, staring straight ahead. But his mind was racing. What had he just witnessed? What kind of power struggle was unfolding behind these ancient walls? And more importantly, what was Camilla really trying to do? The rain continued to fall. The palace was silent. But James knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. 3 days passed. 3 days of carefully maintained silence. The palace moved like clockwork: ceremonies, meetings, public appearances. On the surface, everything was normal, but James noticed the cracks. He saw the way. William's smile didn't reach his eyes during the charity event at Westminster. He noticed how Camilla arrived late to the family luncheon, her expression distant. He watched King Charles move between them like a man trying to hold water in his hands. Then came the meeting that changed everything. It was early morning. The kind of gray, misty dawn that made London feel ancient and secretive. James was stationed outside the king's private study when the door opened and a pale-faced assistant hurried out. Clutching a folder to her chest, she glanced at James, her eyes wide. Then she was gone. Moments later, Prince William arrived. He wore a dark suit, his expression grim. He didn't knock. He simply opened the door and went inside. James heard raised voices almost immediately. "You can't be serious." "That was William," King Charles responded, but his voice was too low to make out the words. "She's trying to rewrite the line of succession priorities." Father, she has no authority. She's my wife. She's the queen consort. She has every right to offer counsel. Counsel. William's laugh was bitter. This isn't counsel. This is manipulation. James felt his pulse quicken. Line of succession. Those words carried weight in the royal family. They were sacred, unchangeable, or so everyone thought.
Act!
After everything we've been through, the scandals, the press, the public doubt, we need stability. We need to show strength. By sidelining my children. By pushing them into the spotlight before they're ready. William's voice cracked slightly. George is 11 years old. Charlotte is 9. They deserve to be children. They're royals, William. They've never been just children. The words hung in the air like poison. James had heard enough. He took a quiet step back, creating distance, giving the illusion of privacy, but his mind was reeling. What exactly was Camilla proposing? What changes was she pushing for? The door opened again. William stepped out, his face flushed, his jaw set. He looked at James for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but firm. Captain Hartley, walk with me. It wasn't a request. They moved through the corridors in silence, past portraits of kings and queens long dead, past windows overlooking the palace gardens. Finally, William stopped in a small, private sitting room. He closed the door behind them. James stood at attention. William turned to face him. How long have you served my family, James? 12 years, sir? And in those 12 years, have I ever asked you for anything beyond your duty? No, sir. William nodded slowly. He walked to the window, staring out at the gray sky. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, vulnerable. My mother used to say that the worst cage is the one made of gold. She knew what it was like to be trapped by duty, by expectation, by people who claimed to love you, but really only wanted to control you. James said nothing. He barely breathed. I won't let that happen to my children. William turned back to face him. His eyes were fierce, determined. Camilla is pushing for them to take on full royal duties within 2 years. Public engagements, speeches, constant media presence. She wants to modernize the monarchy by making them the face of a new generation.
Ow.
James felt his stomach drop. George was barely out of primary school. Charlotte still giggled at cartoons. Louis was only 6. She says it will secure public support, that it will show the monarchy is relevant, vibrant, forward-thinking. William's hands clenched into fists. But I know what it really is. It's about her legacy, about proving she belongs here, about erasing the shadow my mother still casts. The truth hit James like a punch. This wasn't about the children at all. This was about power, about history, about a woman trying to rewrite her place in a story that had already been written. What do you need from me, sir? James asked quietly. William looked at him for a long moment. Then he spoke words that would change both their lives. I need you to watch, to listen. And when the time comes, I need you to stand with me. James didn't hesitate. Always, sir. Outside, the sky began to darken. Storm clouds gathered over London, and inside the palace, battle lines were being drawn. The palace held its breath. 2 weeks passed, and the tension grew thicker with each day. James watched it all unfold like a silent observer in a play he couldn't stop. He saw Camilla's private secretary meeting with advisors behind closed doors. He noticed the way certain staff members, those loyal to Herbie, began to whisper in corners. Their voices hushed and urgent, and he saw William growing quieter, more focused, like a man preparing for war. Then came the photograph. It appeared in the Daily Mail on a Wednesday morning. The headline screamed across the front page. Future kings, George and Charlotte, to take on royal duties. The photo showed the children at a recent school event, smiling and waving, but the article beneath it painted a different picture. It spoke of plans, of schedules, of a bold new direction for the monarchy. It quoted anonymous palace sources saying the young royals would begin official engagements within months. James was in the security office when he saw it. His colleague Marcus tossed the paper onto the desk with a low whistle.
Didn't waste.
Any time, did she? James picked up the paper, scanning the article. Every word felt calculated, deliberate. This wasn't a leak. This was a message. She's forcing his hand, Marcus muttered. Put it in the press, make it public, and suddenly it's harder to say no. James felt anger rise in his chest. He'd seen this tactic before, not in the palace, but in the military. Control the narrative, control the outcome. He folded the paper and stood. I need to make a call. Minutes later, James was in William's office. The prince sat behind his desk, the same newspaper spread out before him. His face was carved from stone. She gave this story to them, William said quietly. My father confirmed it an hour ago. Called it strategic communications. James remained silent. William looked up at him. Do you have children, James? No, sir. Then let me tell you what it's like. William stood, moving to the window. Every morning you wake up knowing the world is watching them, judging them, waiting for them to fail. You try to protect them, to give them space to breathe, to be themselves. And then someone like Camilla decides they're tools to be used. His voice was steady, but James could hear the fury beneath it. My mother fought against this. She wanted Harry and me to have real lives, real experiences. She took us to homeless shelters and theme parks. She held us when we cried and let us be angry when we needed to be. William turned back to James. And the establishment hated her for it. They said she was too emotional, too undignified, too human. James nodded slowly. He remembered Diana. Everyone did, the people's princess. The woman who changed everything. Camilla wants to undo all of that, William continued. She wants to turn my children into perfect little royals. Polished, controlled, safe. He practically spat the last word. But I won't let her. I can't. What's your plan, sir? James asked. William reached for a folder on his desk. He opened it, revealing document schedules, proposals, official palace communications, all stamped with Camilla's seal of approval. I'm going to fight her the only way I can, publicly, transparently. He looked at James. Tomorrow, I'm releasing a statement. No royal engagements for George, Charlotte, or Louis until they're 16, non-negotiable. James felt a jolt of surprise. The king approved this? The king, William said carefully. Will have no choice but to support his son and grandchildren, especially when the public hears the truth. It was a bold move, a dangerous one. Going against the queen consort, against palace protocol, against his own father's wishes. But it was also the move of a father protecting his children. How can I help? James asked. William studied him for a moment, and he pulled out another document. This one was different, a list of names. Palace staff, security personnel, advisors. These are the people I trust, William said. People who understand what's at stake. People who won't be swayed by Camilla's influence. He looked at James. Your name is at the top of that list. James felt the weight of those words. This wasn't just about standing guard outside a door anymore. This was about choosing sides in a battle that could reshape the monarchy. I'm honored, sir. Don't be. Not yet. William's expression darkened, because Camilla won't take this lying down. She spent years building her position here. She'll see this as a direct attack. Then let her, James said firmly. Some things are worth fighting for. William smiled, a real smile, for the first time in weeks. My mother would have liked you. That night, James returned to his small flat outside the palace grounds. He sat in the darkness, thinking about duty, about loyalty, about the line between following orders and doing what's right. He thought about Diana, about those two young boys walking behind her coffin, about William's face, then and now, and he made his choice. When the palace erupted in chaos the next morning, when Camilla's allies scrambled to contain the damage, when the press exploded with headlines about royal rebellion, James Hartley stood exactly where he'd promised to be, at William's side, but neither of them knew just how far Camilla was willing to go. The statement went out at 9 in the morning. By noon, the world was on fire. James watched the news coverage from the security office, his coffee growing cold in his hand. Every channel showed the same thing, William's official statement. released through Kensington Palace, clear and uncompromising. As a father and as the future king, I have decided that my children will not undertake official royal duties until they reach the age of 16. Childhood is sacred. It is brief, and it is theirs by right, not by obligation. The words were simple, but the impact was seismic. Within hours, social media exploded. Hashtag Protect the Royal Children trended worldwide. Parents everywhere praised William's decision. Support poured in from all corners, not just from Britain, from around the globe, but inside the palace. It was a different story. James was stationed outside the king's study when Camilla arrived. She moved like a storm swift, powerful, barely contained. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't knock. She simply pushed the door open and vanished inside. The shouting started almost immediately. How dare he? Camilla's voice was shrill, stripped of its usual composure. How dare he undermine me like this? Charles's response was muffled, conciliatory. Conciliatory. Camilla's laugh was sharp. He's made me look like a monster, like some wicked stepmother trying to exploit children. He's protecting his sons and daughter. He's protecting his precious legacy. Diana's legacy. The name came out like venom. Everything I do, every decision I make, is compared to her, judged against her. And I'm tired of it, Charles. I'm tired of being second to a ghost. The silence that followed was heavy. James felt uncomfortable, but he couldn't move. Couldn't leave his post? He stared straight ahead, trying to unhear what he'd just heard. When Camilla spoke again, her voice was quieter, more dangerous. If William thinks he can push me aside, he's mistaken. I've worked too hard, sacrificed too much to be dismissed by a statement to the press. There was a pause. I want you to withdraw your support for his decision, publicly. Camilla, I can't. You can. And you will. Or I'll make this much, much worse for him. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Charles's voice was barely a whisper. What are you saying? I'm saying that William isn't the only one with connections to the press. I'm saying that stories can be written, narratives can be shaped, and public opinion can turn on a dime. Her heels clicked across the floor. He wants to protect his children. Fine, but he can't protect his reputation. Not from me. The door opened. Camilla swept past James without a glance, her perfume sharp and chemical in the air. James waited until her footsteps faded. Then he moved. He found William in the palace gardens, standing beneath an old oak tree. Rain misted down, but the prince didn't seem to notice. He looked exhausted. Sir James approached carefully. I need to speak with you. William turned. You heard. It wasn't a question. Of course he knew. James was learning that William saw everything, understood everything. She's planning something, James said quietly. She threatened to go to the press, to damage your reputation. William nodded slowly. I expected as much. He looked up at the gray sky. My mother used to say that the palace was full of people who smiled at you while holding knives behind their backs. I never truly understood that until now. What will you do? The only thing I can do... William met his eyes. I'll fight. Not with threats or manipulation, but with truth. With transparency. The public supported my statement because it was honest, because it resonated with parents everywhere. That's my weapon, honesty. And if she retaliates, William's jaw tightened. Then we'll deal with it together. The next 3 days were a masterclass in palace warfare. Camilla's team moved quickly. Articles began appearing in certain newspapers, subtle at first. Questions about William's judgment. Suggestions that he was too influenced by his late mother's rebellious streak. Whispers that his decision showed weakness, not strength. But William's team was ready. For every attack, there was a response. Interviews with child psychologists supporting his decision. Statements from other royal families around Europe praising his approach. Opinion pieces from respected journalists, defending his right as a father to make these choices. And then came the unexpected ally. Princess Anne, the king's sister, released her own statement. It was brief, measured, and devastatingly effective. Prince William's decision reflects the values our late mother, Queen Elizabeth, held most dear: duty balanced with humanity, tradition guided by common sense. I stand with him completely. Now, the tide turned, and support gave other royals permission to speak up. Prince Edward and his wife Sophie both voiced their agreement. Even some of the palace staff, those who had served Diana, who remembered her priorities, began to quietly shift their allegiance. Camilla found herself increasingly isolated. James watched it happen from his position in the shadows. He saw the way her allies grew quieter, less certain. He noticed how meetings were scheduled without her input, how decisions were made around her rather than with her. And he saw William growing stronger, more confident, more like the king he would one day become. But James also saw something else, something that worried him. Camilla's expression grew darker each day, more calculating. The smile she wore in public became thinner, more brittle. She was a woman backed into a corner, and cornered animals were the most dangerous of all. Late one evening, James was checking security protocols when he noticed something odd. Camilla's private secretary had accessed William's children's schedule, their school routines, their security details, their private movements. His blood ran cold. What was she planning? James didn't hesitate. He printed the access logs, secured them in a folder, and went straight to William's office. It was past 10 at night. The palace was quiet, most of the staff gone home. But William was still there, working by lamplight, papers spread across his desk. He looked up when James entered. "Captain Hartley, what's wrong?" James closed the door behind him and placed the folder on the desk. "Someone accessed your children's security files. Schedule patterns, transport routes, school timing, everything." William's expression hardened. He opened the folder, scanning the logs. James watched his face grow paler with each line. "Margaret Thornton," William said quietly. "Camilla's secretary." "Yes, sir." William stood, pacing to the window. His hands were shaking, not with fear, but with barely controlled rage. "She's trying to create an incident. Something that makes me look like an incompetent father. A security breach, maybe? Or worse, a manufactured threat that proves that children need more protection, more control, more palace oversight." James felt sick. Would she really endanger them? Not physically. She's not a monster, William turned back. But she'd orchestrate a situation, maybe a photographer getting too close. A supposed stalker incident to prove that my decision to keep them out of the spotlight is dangerous. It was brilliant in its cruelty. Create the problem, then offer herself as the solution. "What do we do?" James asked. William was silent for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone. "I call my father. Tonight, no more games. No more palace politics. This ends now." 20 minutes later, James stood outside the king's private residence. William had gone inside alone. But through the windows, James could see 3 figures: William, Charles, and Camilla. The conversation was animated, heated. At one point, Camilla threw her hands up in frustration. Charles stood between them, looking older than his years, trying to mediate. Then William pulled out his phone. He showed them something: the security logs, James realized. The proof of what had been done. Camilla's face went white. Charles stared at the screen for a long time. Then he looked at his wife. The disappointment on his face was crushing. James couldn't hear the words, but he saw Camilla's reaction. She shook her head violently, speaking rapidly, trying to explain. But Charles held up his hand, stopped her, and then he did something James never expected. He sided with William. The meeting ended shortly after midnight. William emerged first, his face drawn but determined. He nodded at James. "It's done, sir. My father is issuing an official decree tomorrow. All decisions regarding the Wales children will be made solely by Catherine and me. No interference. No exceptions." William's voice was thick with emotion. He apologized, James, for not seeing it sooner, for letting it get this far. James felt relief wash over him. And the Queen Consort. William's expression darkened. She's been advised to step back from family matters. Focus on her own charitable work. Charles was very clear about the consequences if she doesn't. It should have felt like a victory, like justice. But something in William's eyes suggested this wasn't over. Not really. The next morning, the palace released a brief statement. It was formal, careful, but the message was clear: the king supported Prince William's decisions regarding his children completely and without reservation. The press went wild. Speculation ran rampant. Was there a rift between Charles and Camilla? Had William forced his father's hand? What did this mean for the monarchy? But inside the palace, there was only silence. Camilla retreated to Clarence's house. She canceled her engagements for the week. Citing a minor illness, her staff moved around like ghosts. Uncertain and afraid, James thought it was over. He thought they'd won. Then came the photograph. It appeared in a tabloid 3 days later. A grainy image, clearly taken from a distance. It showed George leaving school, his security detail visible in the frame, but with a gap in coverage. A moment of vulnerability. The headline read, "Is the future king safe? Concerns over royal security after Prince William's controversial decision?" The article questioned whether William's desire for normalcy was putting his children at risk. It included quotes from unnamed security experts expressing concern. It painted William as a loving but naive father, prioritizing sentiment over safety, and it had Camilla's fingerprints all over it. William's response was immediate and devastating. He called a press conference. Unprecedented for a senior royal. But William was done playing by the old rules. James stood in the back of the room, watching as William faced the cameras. He looked every inch a future king, composed, authoritative, but human. "I want to address the recent concerns about my children's security," William began. His voice was steady. "Let me be clear. Their safety has always been, and will always be, my highest priority. The suggestion that my decisions as a father compromise their well-being is not only false, it's deeply harmful." He paused, letting the words sink in. "There are those within the establishment who believe children of the monarchy exist to serve an institution. I believe the institution exists to serve the nation, and that includes allowing children to be children." His eyes were fierce. "My mother understood this, and I will honor her memory by ensuring my children have what she fought to give me a childhood." The room erupted with questions, but William raised his hand. "I also want to address the source of these recent stories. There has been a coordinated effort to undermine my family's privacy and security. This ends today. Any further breaches will be met with legal action. Any publication that participates will be held accountable." It was a declaration of war, and everyone knew who he was talking about. James saw it in the journalists' faces, the understanding, the recognition. They weren't stupid. They knew where these stories came from, and now William had called it out, publicly, fearlessly, that night. James was doing his final security check when he encountered Camilla in one of the palace corridors. She was alone, her face haggard in the dim light. They stopped, facing each other. "You think he's won?" Camilla said quietly. "You think this is over?" James said nothing. "He's made an enemy today. Not just of me, of tradition itself, of the very system that will one day make him king." She stepped closer. "And when that crown is on his head, when the weight of centuries is on his shoulders, he'll understand. He'll realize that sentiment is a luxury monarchs can't afford." "With respect, ma'am," James said carefully, "I think you're wrong. I think sentiment, caring about people, about family, about what's right, is exactly what makes a good king." Camilla smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Then I suppose we'll see, won't we?" She walked away, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. James stood alone, watching her go. And for the first time since this all began, he wondered what would happen when William actually became king. Would he remember this moment? This fight? Or would the crown change him, the way it changed everyone who wore it? The weeks that followed were quiet, too quiet. Camilla kept to her side of Palace's life, attending only the most essential functions. When she and William were in the same room, they were cordial, but cordial. Charles looked tired, caught between his wife and his son, trying to hold a family together that was fracturing at the seams. James watched it all with a mixture of relief and unease. They'd won the battle, but the war felt far from over. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was a rainy Tuesday in March. James was escorting William through the palace after a meeting when they passed the blue drawing room. Through the open door, they saw George sitting at a desk, working on homework. Charlotte was nearby reading a book. Louis played quietly with toy cars on the carpet. William stopped. He just stood there, watching his children. And James saw something in his face. A softness. A vulnerability that rarely showed through the princely composure. "Do you know what my mother told me the night before she died?" William said quietly. James remained still, barely breathing. "She said, 'Be brave, be kind, and never forget who you are.'" William's voice was thick with emotion. "I was 15. I didn't understand what she meant. I thought I knew who I was, a prince, a future king. But that's not what she meant." He turned to look at James. She meant the person underneath all of that. The boy who cried at sad movies, who loved his brother fiercely, who wanted to be normal so badly it hurt. William's eyes glistened. "She was telling me not to let the crown erase that person, not to let duty become an excuse for being inhuman." Inside the room, George looked up and saw his father. He smiled a pure, uncomplicated smile and waved. William waved back. "Camilla thinks sentiment is weakness," William continued. "She thinks caring too much makes you vulnerable. And maybe she's right. Maybe it does. But I'd rather be vulnerable and human than powerful and cold." He started walking again. James fell into step beside him. "My mother lost herself in this place," William said. "The expectations, the criticism, the constant scrutiny, it broke her. And I won't let that happen to my children. I won't let them be sacrificed on the altar of tradition." They reached William's office. He turned to face James, and for a moment the prince looked less like royalty and more like any father trying to do right by his kids. "Thank you, James, for standing with me, for believing that some things matter more than protocol." James felt a lump in his throat. "It's been my honor, sir." William smiled a real smile, warm and genuine. "I have a feeling we'll need each other again someday. When I'm king, when the pressure is even greater, I'll need people like you. People who remember why we do this." "I'll be here," James promised. And he meant it. That evening, James returned to his flat. He poured himself a drink and stood at the window. Looking out at the city lights of London, he thought about Diana, about those two young boys walking behind her coffin, about William, now a father himself, fighting to break the cycle of pain and control that had defined royal life for so long. He thought about Camilla, bitter and isolated, watching her influence slip away. And he thought about the future, about George, who would one day be king, about Charlotte and Louis, who would support their brother through whatever came. Would they remember this time? Would they understand what their father had fought for? James hoped so. 3 months later, on a sunny morning in June, James was on duty at a private family event. It was George's 12th birthday, small celebration, just family, no press, no cameras. James stood at a respectful distance, watching as William played football with his son in the palace gardens. Charlotte cheered from the sidelines. Louis chased after the ball, too young to really play but included anyway. Catherine laughed, her hand shading her eyes from the sun. And for just a moment, they weren't royals. They were just a family. Camilla appeared beside James, silent as a ghost. They stood together, watching the scene unfold. "He's going to be a different kind of king," she said finally. Her voice was resigned, almost sad. "Not like Charles. Not like Elizabeth. Something new." "Yes," James agreed. "He is. I hope he's ready for what that means. The institution doesn't change easily. It will fight him, test him, try to break him." James looked at her. For the first time, he saw past the ambition, the manipulation, the hunger for relevance. He saw a woman who had fought her own battles to be here, who had endured her own scrutiny, her own pain. Maybe they weren't so different after all of them. fighting for their place in a system that crushed as often as it elevated. "He'll be ready," James said quietly, "because he's not doing this for himself. He's doing it for them." He gestured toward the children, their laughter carrying across the garden. Camilla was silent for a long time. Then she nodded once. "Perhaps you're right." She walked away, her footsteps soft on the gravel path. James never knew if she truly accepted defeat or if she was simply regrouping, waiting for another opportunity. But in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was the laughter of children, the smile on William's face, the way this family, this imperfect, complicated, very human family, was finding their own way forward. Years from now, when George wore the crown, he would remember these days. He would remember a father who fought for his childhood, a mother who protected his innocence, guards and staff who believed that kindness mattered as much as duty, and maybe, just maybe, that memory would change everything. James watched the family play for a few more minutes. Then he turned and resumed his post, standing guard over not just their safety, but their right to be themselves. Because in the end, that's what his oath really meant. Not just protecting lives, but protecting the humanity within those lives. And as the sun set over Kensington Palace, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, James Hartley stood his ground. A royal guard, a loyal friend, a witness to history, and a man who believed that love messy, inconvenient, powerful love was worth fighting for, even in a palace, even against a queen, even when the whole weight of tradition said otherwise. Some battles, after all, are too important to walk away from, and some promises, like the one William made to his children, like the one Diana made to her sons, like the one James made to them, all are worth keeping, no matter the cost. The story doesn't end here. It never really ends for families like this. But on that summer evening, as laughter echoed through the palace gardens, it felt like a new beginning, and that was enough.